Hi, everybody. Because I would love to see everyone do really well in this class, I would love to give out as many A's as there are people enrolled in this class. I decided to put together a little presentation so that I can give you what I believe is the best advice after many years of teaching this class and how to do really well in advanced physiology and pathophysiology. All right, so we're going to talk a lot about learning and specifically how to learn in this class. And before we talk about learning, and before we approach anything that has to do with learning, we have to really prepare the soil. You know, when you're learning something, you're really planting, you're putting in seeds and you're planting it and watching that knowledge and understanding grow. And so it's really important for us to sort of adjust our mindset and how do we approach this learning journey here. So first off, the process of learning is really more than just gaining information or knowledge, right? Learning is not just about assimilating information, right? Learning is growing. Learning changes us, and change can sometimes be uncomfortable. So keep that in mind, that there might be some discomfort as you are moving through this course or moving through your education as a whole. You're growing, you are changing. Learning is active, right? You cannot learn something while being passive. So as we go through this, we're going to talk about how we take stock in our study approaches, really take an inventory, and really look at what are we doing that's passive, and how can we kind of abandon those tactics and take on techniques that are more active. The other thing to keep in mind is that learning can be messy. Learning often is messy. So many years I have seen students who struggled to learn in my class show me these beautiful notebooks, right? Showing me these notes that they've taken, that multiple colors and just absolutely gorgeous. But the problem is that it looked fantastic on the page, but they weren't absorbing it, right? That learning didn't happen. So learning can be messy. Like, just because your notes are beautiful doesn't mean your learning is good. And just because your notes are a mess doesn't mean that you're not learning, right? So learning can be messy. Be open to that messiness. Learning also takes time and repetition. Okay? Learning takes time and repetition. It is really like marinating a good steak, right? Actually, you don't really marinate a steak, but marinating a very good piece of meat. I'm sorry, vegetarians, but you cannot marinate anything within 20 minutes, right? You can't marinate anything really quickly. It takes some time. And of course, especially at QSON, time is of the essence, right? We are always crunched for time. So time management is going to be absolutely critical. And then finally, identify your self-limiting beliefs, right? One belief that I've heard often from students is some students come into QSON and come into my class, my science class, really believing that they're not a science person, right? And so I think there's no such thing as a quote-unquote science person, and I really invite you to look at what your self-limiting beliefs are and really be open to challenging them. Okay, so time management, organization and time management. This is going to be absolutely critical. So before we talk about anything, I want to talk about creating an academic calendar or schedule for yourself. And what I really recommend is you put the energy into doing this before classes begin, or at the very beginning of the semester. And what I recommend is start big and really work down from there. So look at your semester as a whole, then each course, and then look month to month. Then take a look at what your weeks are going to look like, and then finally looking at the structure of your days. So in terms of looking at the whole semester, you should be looking at all of your courses and marking down all the important dates. This includes classes, right? One of your classes. It includes all the deadlines for all the assignments, quizzes, tests, anything like that. Okay? You're going to take a look at the entire semester, all of your courses, and create a calendar for all of those important dates. So now we're going to look month to month. And I want you to look every month, I want you to look backwards from those deadlines that you've marked down. So if you have a deadline for a concept map, right, I want you to work backwards and figure out how long is it going to take me to complete that particular assignment. And I want you to mark that date, right? Mark the dates of preparation for the assignments that are due. Okay, so then you know this is when I'm supposed to be starting on whatever date this is. It's when I'm going to start working on that concept map. Okay, so work backwards from your deadline dates and mark down the dates that you need to start your preparations so that you can meet those deadlines. And then weekly, you're going to look at each week. And I want you to take note. So right now you've written down your class times, you've written down your assignments, when you need to start your assignments, that kind of thing, when you need to start studying for an exam. And then now I want you to look at your week, your sort of weekly schedule. And I want you to take note of any blank blocks of time. And I want you to decide which blocks of time you're going to dedicate to your schoolwork and which blocks of time you're going to dedicate to other needs, right? So Wednesday mornings might be free for you, and so that's going to be a block of time that you're always going to dedicate towards schoolwork, right? Friday evenings are a free block of time. Well, I'm going to dedicate that time to spending time with my family, right? Or visiting my mom, or whatever it is. So I want you to take note of those blocks of time and in a rough way sort of designate what those blocks are going to be used for. And then I want you to take a look at your a single day. And I want you to create a daily routine that supports all of those goals that we just talked about. I want you to keep it consistent and healthy. I want you to think about waking up and sleeping at the same time every day. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Right? Including some kind of movement or exercise and connecting with friends and family. Okay? So create a daily routine for yourself where you are really creating space and time for you to take care of each and every day. Take care of yourself each and every day. Okay, so let's talk about how to approach advanced physiology and pathophysiology, this class that we're about to start. So first off, absolutely everyone can succeed in a science course. I don't care what you studied previously. I don't care what sort of poor experiences you may have had, or even great experiences you may have had. The key to succeeding, for anybody to succeed in a science course, is putting in the right kind of effort for the right amount of time, repeated at the right frequency. Okay, so you do those things and you will succeed in that science course no matter what it is. Science classes involve usually a lot of information, often very unfamiliar, new concepts, and also new ways of thinking. And the learning tends to build on itself. It's a little like building a house. Each unit lays the foundation for later units. So this kind of learning requires that the learner take on or study each learning unit as it's presented. Okay? You cannot build the first floor of a house until you've laid the foundation for the house. And you also can't build a house that's going to pass inspection, right? And our tests, our exams are the inspection. You're not going to be able to build a house that passes inspection by trying to build it overnight, right? In other words, cramming is not going to be an effective tool. All right. So specifically our class, Advanced Physiology and Pathophysiology, the general format for our course is a 3-stage structure. This structure is called the Encounter, Engage, and Reflect structure. Okay. In the encounter phase, this is happening before class. Okay. in this stage of the class, in the structure, you are introduced to the weekly learning unit through pre-recorded video lectures, and then there are these check yourself quizzes right after each video lecture. And so you are going to learn best if you're able to work through those videos and quizzes before we meet for class, before our Zoom class. Okay, so that's the encounter. The next step is the engage. The engage stage happens during our live Zoom classes. Here we are going to spend time together reviewing, discussing, and processing the learning unit. So our Zoom classes, I am not lecturing. These are basically group study sessions. We will work together to answer study questions, we'll work through case studies, and we'll discuss the material. Right? And we'll answer any questions that might have come up for you when you watch the videos. And then lastly, the last stage is the reflect stage, and this happens after class. And this involves the work that you will do on your own, but also work that you might do with me and the TAs if you attend the weekly office hours and the review sessions, which I highly recommend. It's during this reflect stage that you will process, reinforce, and build the structure of your learning through effective studying. Okay? And that brings up the question, what does effective studying look like? Well, we are going to talk about that. And then I want you to notice that all stages of this structure involve active participation. Okay? How well you learn will depend on how actively you are participating. Okay, so let's break down each of these stages: encounter, engage, reflect. So encounter, what you're doing before class. Download the document with the slides from the pre-recorded lectures, right? So in every module on Canvas, I provide you with some document, whether it's a PowerPoint document or PDF of the slides that I used to in my recorded videos. Okay, this document may help you take notes, right? Some people like to take notes right on the slides. Some people like to weave them into their notes. Then, in a comfortable place without any distractions, I want you to watch this pre-recorded video, and I want you to watch it as if you're sitting in a classroom. Right? I want you to take really careful notes. Take your time. You have the advantage of being able to stop my lecture, rewind the recording, and do that at any kind of challenging point in the lecture so that you can make sure that you are understanding and that you're taking really good notes. Okay? I want you to keep a list of questions, right, or confusing points that come up for you as you watch the video. So this process this is the bulk of your studying, right? This is the bulk of your quality time. This process may take you between 1.5 to 2 hours for every 1 hour of video lecture. So you don't have to do this in all one sitting. You can break it up over a couple of different sittings. But I really recommend you take your time with this. Okay? All of the didactic information you're going to get tested on is in those video lectures. Okay. Next, in between each video, you're going to do a check yourself quiz. In fact, you can't really move on to the next video unless you go through the check yourself quiz. These quizzes are short and they specifically quiz you on what was just presented. Okay. Before you move on to the next, after you take the quiz, before you move on to the next video, just review your answers to see what you got right or wrong. You don't have to retake the quiz. If you don't have to retake the quiz. I actually recommend you don't. I recommend you move on to the next one. Lastly, skim through your notes and slides right before you come to class. Okay, so you've watched all the videos, you've taken notes. Right before class starts, just skim through the slides and the notes. Okay. So one of these modules, again, this is before class, and just so you know, one of these modules, this is a screenshot of module 1. The first file in that module is the PowerPoint, and then the next item in that module is the first video lecture, right? So the video lectures are in parts oftentimes. So that's part one. So that part might be, let's say, 15 minutes long. And then you'll take a little quiz. You'll do a check yourself quiz, right? And then you'll be able to move on to the next video. Right? And so you'll do that all before you come to class. Next is the engage. So what are we doing in class? So first of all, I want you to have all your notes, slides, and list of questions or confusing points handy for class. I want you to actively participate in the class activity or discussion, right? We're going to do things like review study questions. We're going to do things like case studies, right? There's going to be a discussion. I want you to actively participate. I want you to ask your questions, right? So that list of questions that you had, ask them in class. I want you to take good notes during class. And you can do this by sort of adding to your existing notes, maybe in the margins or in a different color ink, or having a completely separate set of class notes that are kept near your pre-class notes. And I also want you to really pay attention to the questions that other students are asking. Right? Sometimes somebody asks a question that opens up a new perspective for you that'll really be very helpful. And then here's the big question, the reflect. What are you supposed to do after class? This is extremely important. What I'm going to recommend is immediately after class, make a short list of topics that you feel the most unsure about and any new questions that may have come up during class. I also then recommend that you attend office hours or one of the TA-led review sessions to ask your questions and also hear questions from other students, and so that you can review and reinforce that learning unit for that week. And then study, study, study. You're going to study the learning materials. There are many effective and less effective study techniques, and you need to really focus on using high yield study techniques, and we'll talk more about that shortly. But you're going to spend at least 15, or I recommend you spend at least 15 or 20 minutes every day studying patho. You're probably going to spend more time than that studying material from all your classes, but for patho, I'm just asking you to give it at least 15 or 20 minutes a day. Okay? It will pay off. In that 15 or 20 minutes, study the current week's material and previous material from the previous weeks. This is called spaced repetition, and it is a proven learning strategy. And I recommend that you don't do it casually. Schedule it into your day and hold yourself to it. Okay, so let's talk about what it means to study effectively. What is effective studying? So general recommendations, okay, setting the scene. Different people study best in different environments. Some people study best in a quiet, distraction-free environment, someplace like the library, or we have those study rooms that you can reserve at CUSON. Or other people actually study better in a busy place, right? Someplace like a coffee shop or a bookstore. They put on their headphones or they put on their earplugs and they can just zone in and study. And they're not going to be interrupted because they're just surrounded by strangers. And they can actually find that they focus better, right? Maybe it's a matter of like trying to tune out the environment that helps them focus. So experiment. Do you need a quiet, empty space, or do you need a bustling space where you're anonymous and you can just zone in? Okay. Have a plan, and this plan should be based on that calendar and schedule that we talked about earlier, and stay organized. Don't be haphazard in when you're studying, what you're studying, and how you're studying. Also, plan on taking breaks, but be careful to avoid break activities that will suck you in. Okay? If you know that every time you open Facebook Marketplace or TikTok, you get sucked in for an hour, don't use that activity as a break activity. Okay? Use something else. Also, consider studying with a friend or classmate. And You might find that that's not helpful to you. That's fine, but you might be surprised. And if you find somebody that you can click with and you're studying, make sure that the studying balances studying solo by yourself and also joint studying. Some people like to study in the same general space. They find it very encouraging. Maybe they're studying solo, but they're just in the same general place, and every once in a while they come together and quiz each other. Okay? But one way or another, just studying with other people is not going to be effective. You're going to need to balance that studying by yourself with studying with other people. Okay, so we're going to talk more about specific strategies for effective studying, but there are some general things for you to understand in terms of effective studying. Studying is basically learning, right? So how does learning happen? First of all, learning is an active process. This means that passive activities like just reading over your notes or listening to my lectures on the train or even rewriting your notes, they are not effective study strategies. They will create a mild amount of learning, right? But I'm going to call that low yield study approaches, and you don't have time for them. You need high yield, time efficient study techniques. Okay? And that's going to require active participation. Now, learning also requires both focused thinking and diffuse thinking. So focused versus diffuse thinking, this is something that was coined by a woman named Barbara Oakley, who is a learning specialist, and she talks about the two major ways that our brain thinks. There is something called focused thinking, and in focused thinking, this is what we usually think about when we think about thinking. This is concentrated thinking. This is problem solving, memorizing, that sort of thing. But there's another way that our brain works. It's called diffuse thinking. And this is what happens when your mind actually relaxes. It's providing a space for you to maybe daydream or your thoughts to wander. It allows your subconscious to make unexpected connections between different ideas. It can help you think about a problem in a completely new way, and it can also help you come up with different innovative solutions, new solutions, and really learn by connecting this new and unfamiliar concept that you're grappling with more familiar ones that you already know. Okay? So there's a lot of magic that's happening in this diffuse thinking, and it's basically, the magic is that when you take a break and you go do something else, your brain doesn't stop working on the problem that you were doing in that focused thinking. Your brain continues to work on it, and it's in that time that you actually start making some significant connections. So in this focused thinking, this is our active study time. We are concentrated. We're using our conscious mind to focus. We execute things, right? We are actively doing something. We are actively studying. But then in these diffuse thinking, this is happening when we're taking those rest breaks, right? Those rest breaks are actually quite productive. Our brain is relaxed. Our subconscious is still working on the problem. We are actually accessing things that we know and making connections and innovating, thinking about them in a completely new way. Okay? So this is really revolutionary, this idea of we need this diffuse thinking, we need those rest breaks in order to actually bring our active study to a whole new level and our learning to a whole new level. So here are some specific study techniques that are effective, and we're talking, they are effective not because I think they're effective. These are evidence-based, right? This is based on this body of research and literature into effective learning strategies. Okay? Practice testing. This is something I think a lot of students know about, and it's a great way to study. Practice testing in our class could be about using your check yourself questions or other practice questions that I'm going to be providing to you. I'm going to be providing practice multiple choice questions and practice open-ended questions and practice clinical scenarios. So lots of opportunity for that. What's nice about testing is that it really helps identify your gaps. And then once you know, okay, this is what I don't know, then you can address that gap. Mind mapping. This happens when you create a visual representation, whether you draw a picture, create a table, make a roadmap of something in the material, right? And it's really important as you're making that visual representation that you're connecting concepts and ideas together, and that it's incredibly important that you are actually creating it. It doesn't work if you're just using something that somebody else created. Okay? The learning actually happens in the creating process. There's also a technique called the Feynman technique. And this is quite simple in its idea. Basically, we are using basic language, our own words, to explain the material and teach it to somebody else. And there's something magical that happens there. When we are trying to teach somebody else a concept, what we immediately realize is what we don't understand about the concept. Because if you can't explain it to somebody, it's because you don't understand it. So it unveils these gaps in your learning that then allow you to address it and close the gap. There's also a technique called the Pomodoro technique, and this sort of is how we can balance that need for focused thinking and diffuse thinking. So we work in these really focused intervals of about 15 to 25 minutes, right? And experiment with how long works for you. And then we follow that by a 5-minute break. Okay, so we study 15, 25 minutes, really focused, take a 5-minute break. And then after we do that for 4 rounds, we're going to take a longer break, 20 or 30 minutes. Okay? If you are sitting there at your desk and you are quote unquote studying for 2-3 hours at a time, I'm going to tell you something, you're not studying. You are engaged in too many passive techniques. You're trying to study, and I have been there. I've personally been there. It's very frustrating, but you're not getting the results that you want to get because you're not actively engaging, and you need those study breaks. Okay? And we need to be able to move back and forth between that focused thinking and the diffuse thinking. Active recall. Instead of doing passive things like rereading your notes, try actively recalling the material. After you've read your notes a few times, close your notes and try to just read it from memory. And you'll see what it actually is that you remember and what it is, what's on the page and what's in your brain, right? So, and then repeat that. Keep repeating it. When you don't remember something, go open it and try to fill in the gap, and then go and repeat it. Right? This really helps identify gaps in your memory and recall and really help you remediate that. Interleaving. Interleaving means that you are varying the subjects or the topics that you are studying. So you're moving between studying for different classes, right? You've got 2 exams coming up. Well, don't feel like you have to study one after the other. Just study for the morning, or within that morning hour, study half of the time one class, the other half the other class, and sort of vary the subjects, sort of shuffle around in the subjects. Or if you're studying for one class, shuffle around the topics. And what that's going to do is it's going to improve your brain's ability to recall material even under different conditions and different contexts, right? So it's going to really help create sort of flexibility in your understanding and in your recall. And then finally, something I said earlier, spaced repetition. This is when you are reviewing and studying material repeatedly over a longer interval of time, right? And this is the opposite of cramming, right? This is the building of the house. Strong foundation, then the first floor, then the second floor. That house is going to pass inspection, okay? It is the most effective method for transferring learning from short-term memory to long-term memory. And that's going to be critical for you to be able to do well on your exams. Okay. So now, how do we use the resources that I provide in class in order to effectively study? So specifically, this is in the sort of reflection stage. This is after class. Now, what do you do with everything? So I recommend, first of all, rewatching parts of the video lecture or parts of the recordings of our class to address any knowledge gaps and reinforce or review difficult concepts. Okay? So revisit those resources in terms of the videos. Use those check yourself quizzes, right? You took those quizzes right after you watched the videos. Well, keep taking them, right? Even after class, keep taking them. Use them to prepare you for the exam. Use them to study, okay? And pay close attention to the questions that you're missing. Use the extra practice questions that I'm going to provide. I'm going to provide practice multiple choice questions and open-ended questions and clinical scenarios. And this is going to really help reinforce your learning. And then finally, ask questions. Formulate and ask questions. You can send them to me or the TAs via email. You can ask during class. You can ask during office hours or review sessions. And then also listen to the questions from your classmates. Okay. And then last but not least, absolutely last but not least, please take good care of yourself. Okay. Learning can be stressful. It can be uncomfortable. School can be stressful and uncomfortable, but also learning can be fun, and you are genuinely changing and growing through this process of your training here at CUSON. And so the difference between being able to move through it in a healthy and happy way versus moving through it and healthy, happy, and successful and not being able to do that, the difference is really often going to be about how you care for yourself, right? Trying to find some balance between your studying and spending time with your friends and family, or doing things that bring you joy. Okay? So please take good care of yourselves, and please also know that I am always here for you. I'm always here for you to talk and for me to listen. So reach out if you need.